nor if surrounded with company would be cheered thereby. Neither are the distorted features expressions of pain, uneasiness, or distress. This everyone knows, and will readily allow upon being suggested, yet still cannot behold, nor even cast a thought upon those objects without shuddering. For knowing that a living person must suffer grievously under such appearances, they become habitually formidable to the mind, and strike a mechanical horror, which is increased by the customs of the world around us. There is usually one pang, added voluntarily and unnecessarily to the fear of death, by our affecting to compassionate the loss which others will have in us. If that were all, we might reasonably set our minds to rest. The pathetic exhortation on country tombstones, "Grieve not for me, my wife and children dear," etc., is for the most part speedily followed to the letter. We do not leave so great a void in society as we are inclined to imagine, partly to magnify our own importance and partly to console ourselves by sympathy. Even in the same family, the gap is not so great. The wound closes up sooner than we should expect. Nay, our room is not infrequently thought better than our company. People walk along the streets the day after our deaths just as they did before, and the crowd is not diminished. While we were living, the world seemed in a manner to exist only for us, but our delight and amusement because it contributed to them. But our heart ceased to beat, and it goes on as usual, and thinks no more about us than it did in our lifetime. The million are devoid of sentiment and care, as little for you or for me as if we belonged to the moon. We'll live the week over in the Sunday's paper, or are decently interred in some obituary at the month's end. It is not surprising that we are forgotten so soon after we quit this mortal stage. We are scarcely noticed while we are on it. It is not merely that our names are not known in China. They have hardly been heard of in the next street. We are hand in glove with the universe and think the obligation is mutual. This is an evident fallacy. If this, however, does not trouble us now, it will not hereafter. A handful of dust can have no quarrel to pick with its neighbors, or complaint to make against Providence, and might well exclaim, if it had but an understanding and a tongue, "Go thy ways, old world, swing round in blue ether, voluble to every age, you and I shall no more jostle." It is amazing how soon the rich and titled, even some of those who have wielded great political power, are forgotten. A little rule, a little sway, is all the great and mighty have betwixt the cradle and the grave, and after its short date they hardly leave a name behind them. A great man's memory may, at the common rate, survive him half a year. His heirs and successors take his titles, his power, and his wealth, all that made him considerable or courted by others, and he has left nothing else behind him either to delight or benefit the world. Posterity are not by any means so disinterested as they are supposed to be. They give their gratitude and admiration only in return for benefits conferred. They cherish the memory of those to whom they are indebted for instruction and delight, and they cherish it just in proportion to the instruction and delight they are conscious they receive. The sentiment of admiration springs immediately from this ground, and cannot be otherwise than well-founded. The effeminate clinging to life as such, as a general or abstract idea, is the effect of a highly civilized and artificial state of society. Men, formerly plunged into all the vicissitudes and dangers of war, or staked their all upon a single die, or some one passion, which, if they could not have gratified, life became a burden to them. Now our strongest passion is to think. Our chief amusement is to read new plays, new poems, new novels, and this we may do at our leisure, in perfect security, ad infinitum. If we look into the old histories and romances, before the belles lettres neutralized human affairs and reduced passion to a state of mental equivocation, we find the heroes and heroines not setting their lives at a pin's fee, but rather courting opportunities of throwing them away in a very wantonness of spirit. They raise their fondness for some favorite pursuit to its height, to a pitch of madness, and then think no price too dear to pay for its full gratification. Everything else is dross. They go to death as to a bridal bed, and sacrifice themselves or others without remorse at the shrine of love, of honor, of religion, or any other prevailing feeling. Romeo runs his seasick, weary bark upon the rocks of death the instant he finds himself deprived of his Juliet, and she clasps his neck in their last agonies and follows him to the same fatal shore. One strong idea takes possession of the mind and overrules every other, and even life itself, joyless without that, becomes an object of indifference or loathing. There is at least more of imagination in such a state of things, more vigor of feeling and promptitude to act, than in our lingering, languid, protracted attachment to life for its own poor sake. It is perhaps also better, as well as more heroical, to strike at some daring or darling object, and if we fail in that, to take the consequences manfully, than to renew the lease of a tedious, spiritless, charmless existence, merely, as Pierre says, to lose it afterwards in some vile brawl for some worthless object. Was there not a spirit of martyrdom, as well as a spice of the reckless energy of barbarism, in this bold defiance of death? Had not religion something to do with it? The implicit belief in a future life, which rendered this of less value, and embodied something beyond it to the imagination, so that the rough soldier, the infatuated lover, the valorous knight, etc., could afford to throw away the present venture, and take a leap into the arms of futurity, which the modern skeptic sinks back from, with all his boasted reason and vain philosophy, weaker than a woman. I cannot help thinking so myself, but I have endeavored to explain this point before, and will not enlarge farther on it here. A life of action and danger moderates the dread of death. It not only gives us fortitude to bear pain, but teaches us at every step the precarious tenure on which we hold our present being. Sedentary and studious men are the most apprehensive on this score. Dr. Johnson was an instance in point. A few years seemed to him soon over compared with those sweeping contemplations on time and infinity with which he had been used to pose himself. In the still life of a man of letters, there was no obvious reason for a change. He might sit in an armchair and pour out cups of tea to all eternity. Would it had been possible for him to do so? The most rational cure, after all, for the inordinate fear of death is to set a just value on life. If we merely wish to continue on the scene, to indulge our headstrong humors and tormenting passions, we had better be gone at once. And if we only cherish a fondness for existence according to the good we derive from it, the pang at parting with it will not be very severe. End of On the Fear of Death by William Hazlitt.